Welcome to the NFL show on the Grueling Truth. I'm your host, Sam Teets. Today we'll be covering something we usually do every week during the regular season, and that's going through our quarterback power rankings. We'll be counting down the top 32 projected starters in the NFL. And to help me do that, please welcome my co-host from the FF Faceoff, Anthony Servino. How you doing, Anthony?
What's going on, Sam?
Not much. We got a little NFL news to go through real quick before we get into it, though. We got the Dallas Cowboys signing Cameron Irving, who spent some time in the Kansas City Chiefs last year. So he's got a Super Bowl title, and now he's going to play with Dallas. Where do you see Irving potentially fitting in on Dallas's offensive line?
I mean, he's a former first-round pick, 19th overall back in 2015 by the Browns. As you said, he made 8 spot starts last season at left tackle when Fisher went down. And what I think this is going to be for Dallas, they lost Cameron Fleming. I believe he went over to the New York Giants, who was the reserve left tackle. And I think Cameron Irving is going to replace him in case Tyron Smith goes down. So it's a quality signing. I don't hate it.
No, I think it's probably a good move for them, honestly. You look at building depth on the offensive line, you get a guy who has played guard, has played tackle in his career. He can move around a little bit. So you get a little bit of everything from him. So for a cheap signing, it's probably a pretty good move. But some other news, Jadeveon Clowney in a recent interview, Clowney spoke out, said he has not ruled out going back to the Seattle Seahawks. But his window to going to Seattle might be closing at this point because the Seahawks are making moves to bring in all of their rookies, get those contracts done. And his number 90, which Clowney wore last year, has already been reclaimed by Jaron Reed, the defensive tackle who originally gave the number up to Clowney. So it looks like Clowney might not be heading back to Seattle, even if he says it's still open.
I mean, does that necessarily keep him out of Seattle just because his number might not be there?
No, but at this point, I don't think there's enough that's tying him to Seattle. I've heard conversations that the Seahawks are in talks with Everson Griffin continuously, or they're still at least in contact with his agent. I haven't heard the same thing about Clowney, honestly. He hasn't ruled out going back there, but there's not been as much tying the two sides together. There's not been reports saying they're in contact like they with Everson Griffin. So for me, it's just a symbol that there's not really any connection there. And if Clowney hasn't spoken to Jaron Reed, who he started alongside last year, he hasn't told him that he's coming back to Seattle, and Reed feels comfortable going out and taking the number back. It just shows me another little piece of the puzzle that potentially there's no real conversation going on here between Clowney and Seattle.
Now, I've also heard that Everson Griffin, that door with Minnesota is still not closed. And I think one of these dominoes is going to affect the other. It's one of those situations. I think if Clowney ends up going to, where was it, Tennessee or Cleveland, then I think Seattle can make a bigger push for Griffin. And if Griffin goes back to the Vikings, then I think we're going to see Seattle make a bigger push for Clowney.
When you got another situation with Yannick Ngakoue in Jacksonville, that's another guy, another starter.
Oh, right. He's the one that I keep forgetting about. Because he was so vocal going into the draft, no movement happened. I think Clowney's trade last year, because they're both in similar situations going into a franchise tag situation. And Jadeveon Clowney was traded for peanuts, and I think Jacksonville probably wants a lot more than what Houston got for Clowney. And that's the holdup this year with Ngakoue.
I think there was actually a conversation where Ngakoue was going back and forth with some personnel from the Jacksonville Jaguars on Twitter.
It was the owner.
Yeah, it was the owner's son or something like that. It's basically, like you said, show me the compensation, basically. Show me what you're going to bring back. And I guess that's the part they're missing so far is no one's offered the picks from Yannick Ngakoue. And I can understand why, because basically at this point, Ngakoue says he's never playing for the Jaguars ever again. And so at that point, if you're an NFL team, why would you offer why would you offer a first-round pick for him if he already says he's not going to play with Jacksonville?
You can't.
Yeah, I would think you would just wait until week 6, wait until right before the trade deadline or something like that, and then try to make a move for him, try to get him for maybe a second-round pick. Don't give up a first for him.
After the way they handled Jalen Ramsey and they cleaned house, they're trying to, I guess, change the culture and clean up the locker room, and they want to move Fournette, and they seem desperate. They're not going to get value for Fournette. They're not going to get value for Ngakoue. The longer this goes, they just need to cut ties.
Yeah, at this point, I think if you get an offer for a second-round pick, if you get that, it's probably the highest you're going to get from Ngakoue at this point. So if anyone even offers you a second round pick, just take it because it's not going to get better than that. And if you don't,
No.
if you don't get a second round pick, like if you just keep him on your roster and he doesn't sign the franchise tag, and you're just trying to like show him a lesson or something like that, I mean, you're giving away basically draft picks that you could potentially get in return for a guy like him, and he'll sit out an entire season and not make any money. So for me, it's just at this point, you gotta just cash in and get whatever you can from Ngakoue and Fournette.
Right.
But there's an interesting situation involving. There's also a situation with Clowney. I heard this Philadelphia Eagles are still tied to Jadeveon Clowney potentially, so the Eagles are not out of the running for Clowney. And if they get him, I mean, that's a dominant defensive front there. They already got a pretty good group of guys, but if they add Clowney, it just changes everything, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Philadelphia, but sure, that would be a potential move to put them over the top on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, because we talked about Derek Barnett the other day, how they declined his fifth-year option because he really hasn't put together everything yet. And with Brandon Graham starting to age a little bit, they can actually replace one of the guys potentially with Jadeveon Clowney. And you pair him up with someone like Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox, and suddenly that's a very scared defensive front in Philadelphia. Probably is maybe even strong enough to neutralize Dallas's offensive line if you get Clowney there.
Right. And they're pretty competitive as it is, but I would give Dallas the edge right now without Clowney.
Yeah, but like I said, Jimmy Clowney, even though he's got the health injuries and all that stuff, he's just a freak athlete. I mean, you cannot get outside of Clowney. You can't outrun him. Even on running backs can't get past him. I saw him contain Lamar Jackson last year when they were playing against Baltimore. So he's that kind of athlete. And if you get him on the defense, it just alters your entire formation, alters everything you can do defensively. So some interesting potential landing spots are Davion Clowney and also Everson Griffin and Yannick Ngakoue. It's a very loaded class of defensive ends who are still out there, could really make a difference in the long run. But we'll move on now to the main segment of our show for today, and that's a quarterback power ranking based on who we believe will be the top 32 starters going into the regular season, and that is in week one. I know there are some of these will still expect to change potentially throughout the year, but going into week one, these are who I believe will be the 32 starters. And we'll start at the very top, and this is the obvious one. I think both you and I are going to agree on this. It's got to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no doubt for Patrick Mahomes. And Lamar Jackson did have an incredible year last year, but Mahomes was the one to ultimately win the Super Bowl. You could have – I think he would have made a bigger case for MVP if he didn't get hurt. But I think Mahomes has to be the unanimous number one quarterback going into 2020.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I'm just curious. I don't think there hasn't been a back-to-back MVP winner in quite a while, I'm pretty sure. I think we're at a point where in sports we like to award a new guy every year almost with this kind of stuff. It's not always being the same guy back-to-back like it used to be in some sense. Like, I mean, really, look at the last 10 years. There really hasn't been back-to-back MVP award winners. So it's a strange scenario, but I think Mahomes is the guy who maybe changed that just because how dominant he is offensively. But that will take us to number two. And my second quarterback going into next year is Russell Wilson.
Who's your three?
Lamar Jackson.
I'm not going to kill you for it because Lamar Jackson still hasn't developed into a passer. And that's going to be the thing. I know that everybody wants to change the league and wants the league to morph into more of a Lamar Jackson style type of quarterback league, but it doesn't work. We haven't seen it work yet. I mean, as mobile as Patrick Mahomes is, you can still make the case that a pocket passer won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, really, like Lamar Jackson.
I mean, he's not a statue pocket passer, but he still works well out of the pocket, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's got incredible pocket control, and he can – we've talked about Russell Wilson like this too. He has the ability to escape and extend plays with his legs.
Right. And that's why you got to put Russell ahead of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, because he has the pocket control right now. He understands the pressure. He understands things. And I've seen him do it in the playoffs as well. I've seen Russell Wilson come out and lead teams in the playoffs. I haven't seen Lamar Jackson do that yet. So for me, there's a bit of a difference there. But it's something that's experience-wise can change. By year 4 or 5, I expect Lamar Jackson will have caught up a little bit. But for now, the experience puts Russell Wilson ahead of Lamar Jackson. But that brings us to number 4. My number 4 spot is slightly influenced by the weapons he has around him. But my number 4, and this is a big jump where I had him at the very end of the season, it's Tom Brady.
So you have Lamar 3, Brady 4?
Yeah.
Why?
Why? I
Can
think
you
Tom Brady. Go ahead.
you can't put Lamar, or do you have an issue putting Lamar behind Brady?
You know what? I swapped these two back and forth a little bit, but I do respect what Lamar Jackson did last year in terms of like what he was able to put together rushing wise. He did throw 36
So do I.
touchdowns to lead the NFL, so it wasn't like he didn't have success. For me, I haven't seen Brady play in Tampa Bay yet, but you have to look at where I finished. Where on my final quarterback power rankings for last year, I had Brady at like number 11 or number 12, so I had him outside the top 10. I think swapping to Tampa Bay puts him inside the top 5. I'm just not positive I want to put him ahead of Lamar Jackson just yet.
I mean, that's fair. Because we haven't seen him play yet. But still, 4 is not bold. I mean, 4 is, I guess some people will call it bold. I don't. Because I think he's going to have an incredible season. I think Brady, his ceiling is a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think so too. I think with all those weapons he's got around him, I think we could see Brady really turn back the clock and look like he did maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I really think he'll be that good this coming season. Now, I do have someone at 5 who I'm a little concerned about in the long run. I have him there just because of how efficient he is, but I have Drew Brees at number 5.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't have him that high. Who's your 6?
Aaron Rodgers.
That's a tough one because I think Aaron Rodgers is probably the better quarterback right now, but Drew Brees has a better arsenal of weapons around him.
Yeah, I think so too. And we saw it after Green Bay basically passed on all the great receivers in the draft to get him a backup quarterback instead. I think it really doesn't improve the situation at all. And you look at Drew Brees, he now has Emmanuel Sanders coming to his side as well. They drafted another offensive lineman to help him out again. So I think Brees is in a situation where maybe over a 16-game season, not as good as Aaron Rodgers, but if you want one game and just have to win one game, I think Brees is probably got the better situation than Rodgers does. And Rodgers at 6, I think I like Rodgers at 6. I think he's going to come out here. I think he could potentially perform like a top 5 quarterback again, based on the fact that I think he's going to be pissed. I think he wants to play hard this year and prove that he is the man in Green Bay.
Oh, he's absolutely going to come out with a chip on his shoulder. For anybody who thinks that Aaron Rodgers at 6 is too high, I don't think he's losing anything. You know, is he going to be the same player as he was 5 years ago? No. But he didn't fall off of a cliff. He didn't have like a Joe Flacco like fall off. I just think that they are taking weapons from him. They're not adding anything, at least at receiver and at tight end. I mean, they added a running back in A.J. Dillon. But they're not, you know, this is a player who at his peak, he had Randall Cobb, Adams, and Jordy Nelson. Now he's left with, you know, Devontae Adams and a bunch of guys.
Even before that, he had Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Jermichael Finley. He had guys like that. And now he doesn't really have anyone. I think the issue, people will say Rodgers is declining. So they look at 2016 when he threw for 40 touchdowns and he was completing 65% of his pass attempts. And now he's down to completing about 62% of his pass attempts and 25 to 26 touchdowns. That's not all on Aaron Rodgers. That's just the fact he doesn't have the weapons anymore. And
he was a top 3 quarterback in terms of drop passes. So of all 32, he had the 3rd most. Dak had the most.
Who had the most?
Dak.
Was Carson Wentz second?
I could look that up. I know Brady was up there.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, we're talking about quarterbacks just don't have the receiving cores around them right now. But when you look at Aaron Rodgers, the second leading receiver was Alan Lazard, who was an undrafted free agent from Iowa State, I think. And he didn't even finish with over 500 yards. They had one player with over 500 receiving yards this past season. And that's not on Aaron Rodgers. That's on the coaching staff and the front office for not getting him the weapons he needs. This is a Hall of Fame quarterback and a 2-time MVP. And they haven't treated him like that.
He had the 6th most. Wentz.
Oh, the 6th most.
Believe it or not, yeah. And with all that talent that Dak has with those receivers, he had the most with 42.
I wonder where that comes from. I wonder who's the guy making all the drops in Dallas then.
It's Cooper and Gallup, even Witten at the end. He was in that Philly game, especially in that must-win. I remember Witten dropping a key 3rd down. Brady had the 7th most. I'm trying to look who has number 2. I'm at quarterback metrics right now, and I can't find the number 2.
I'm trying to think who would that even be? I'm looking like maybe
Garoppolo, maybe.
It could be Garoppolo. Could be Daniel Jones. I don't know.
Garoppolo had number 2. Yep.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that didn't have a lot of receivers there anyways. It was really just Debo Samuel until they got Emmanuel Sanders there.
Yeah.
They did have George Kittle, but my number 7 quarterback, so I had Aaron Rodgers at 6, Drew Brees 5. My number 7 is Deshaun Watson. I do think this is a scenario where I'm really very interested to see what he does this year because he's got Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, 2 injury-prone receivers who are really good when they're healthy, honestly. But he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins. He doesn't really have a running game right now because I don't trust David Johnson. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he performs with a very limited cast around him.
I like Deshaun Watson. I think you can make a case to put him ahead of an Aaron Rodgers or a Drew Brees. But in terms of what he has around him, yes, he lost Hopkins. I like the guys around him. I like Cooks, Fuller, and Cobb. But all 3 of them, not so much Cobb, but you could put him there with the whole injury-prone tag. If they can stay healthy, I think they can overcome what DeAndre Hopkins was doing. But if these guys go down, they're going to be stuck with Kiki Cutie, who was benched last year, and a DeAndre Carter. So a lot of question marks. But if this receiving core can stay healthy, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And let's not forget, David Johnson, if he's healthy, can catch 70 footballs.
Yeah, I think the key is, though, if they're healthy. I just don't know. Like, at this point, I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't put money on that. I'm not drafting them in advance or something like that just because I don't think those players have proven they're able to do that. So if it comes down to a situation where you don't have Brandon Cooks, you don't have Will Fuller, you're left with Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills, and like you said, Kiki QT as your top receiving options. That really just doesn't compare to the other guys we've had on the list. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers has Devontae Adams. So I think Deshaun Watson could be in a bit of a bad situation if the injury bug hits the Houston Texans again. But that takes us up to number 8. And number 8, I have Carson Wentz.
That's fair for Wentz. I don't think it's too high. I don't think it's too low. He had to overcome a lot last season, but Philly didn't get him enough help this year. Instead, they went and drafted a backup who I believe is going to see time, even in the Taysom Hill role. And Jalen Hurts is a player who hasn't he overcome, like, wasn't he the backup everywhere in his collegiate career?
So he was starting originally in Alabama, but then he got replaced by Tua, and then he changed schools eventually. He basically spent a year as Tua's backup, and then changed schools.
So he's a player familiar with somebody in front of him.
Yeah. I think he'll be a good teammate and a good backup. I don't think he's going to have any problem with that. My biggest issue with the Eagles, honestly, and if I was assembling a NFL power rankings based on the teams, I probably would hurt Philadelphia for this because I don't like how they drafted. I don't like Jalen Reagor where they took him. I don't think he's going to be the answer for them, honestly. So I've got some issues with how they drafted. I don't think they got significantly better offensively when they could have, but I think based on what Wentz did with a weaker supporting cast last year that was decimated by injuries, I still think he's deserving of the A spot, even with the issues of injuries and maybe not having a much improved supporting cast this coming season.
Yeah, if one of these guys work, I think Wentz will be fine. If one of these rookies work, because they took 2 other speedy deep threat receivers in the later rounds.
They've got so much speed on that offense right now. I don't really know what they're going to do. So they got Deshaun Jackson, they got Reagor, John Hightower. You talked about the other one, Quez Watkins. They traded for Marquise Goodwin. They've got speed all over that offense right now.
Well, because I think that's what they lacked last year. They couldn't throw the deep ball. Or at least they couldn't connect on a deep ball after Deshaun went down because Aguilar kept dropping them. So I think they're just trying to keep the depth there and hope somebody stays healthy and somebody works. Because between Jackson and Marquise Goodwin can never stay healthy.
No.
And I like them as a player.
Yeah, I like what they've done so far. I hope Marquise Goodwin stays healthy because I really do like him when he's healthy. I really like him when he's good, but Alshon Jeffrey and guys like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside were not the answer for him last year. I don't think they're going to be the answer moving forward. I don't like what Whiteside's done so far. I don't think he's going to develop into a viable receiver. I think Jeffrey at this point, I don't really know what to expect from him. I don't know if he wants out of Philadelphia. I don't know what the relationship is there. with the front office. So that's an interesting situation that could unfold in the next couple of months. But that brings me up to my number 9 now. My number 9 is Dak Prescott.
That's fair for Dak because I think the issue with him was not putting points up in a couple of spots last year in New Orleans against the Patriots and then against a vulnerable Philadelphia team. And not only did they not put points up, but they were pretty close games to where if he did put a touchdown on board, you're looking at a potential 3-win swing, especially that lost against Philly.
Yeah, I've always liked Dak Prescott. Ever since he came out of college, I really liked him. So I have no problem moving him to top 10. I like him where he is right now. I will say this. I think Dallas could be more successful if he threw it closer to 530 times a year instead of throwing it almost 600 times a year.
If you look at Dak's success earlier in his career, he wasn't dropping back a lot. He was throwing for like 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, and then in each of his first 3 seasons, he ran for 6. That's the Dak you were winning with.
Yeah, I think Dallas has to be careful not to ask him to do too much because Dak is a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I don't think he belongs in that top 5 or 6 range right now, at least not at this point in his career. So you got to make sure you're not asking him to do too much. I think even like a guy like Russell Wilson, originally in Russell Wilson's career, he was not asked to do a lot because he had the defense, they had Marshawn Lynch. And you can develop into elite quarterback afterwards, but I think I said, you can't ask Dak Prescott to do too much for your offense right now. And, of course, you got the contract situation, which can always be difficult. We don't know what's going to really happen with that. But you got a high-profile backup in Andy Dalton, who I think is one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. But he does not appear on this list because we're only ranking the projected starters in Week 1. That takes me down to my number 10. My number 10 is Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. This is where things get a little bit more questionable for me. I think there's a bunch of quarterbacks between 10 to 15 who really could kind of flop around and switch spots.
You broke up there. Who was that?
I have Kirk Cousins at number 10.
See, yeah, that's high.
Yeah,
and I think that's a little high for me with Cousins. He lost Diggs, and I know a lot of people are high on Jefferson, but Diggs, I think, is a little bit better than what people give him credit for. And he brought them into a deep playoff run. He won those games he wasn't winning in the past. I just think we're going to see maybe not a regression out of Kirk Cousins statistically, but I think we might see a regression win-wise because that defense is not going to be good this year.
No, they don't have any cornerbacks. They don't have a secondary really at this point, other than they got some rookies.
I think they're going through a transition, and that's going to affect the win column.
Yeah, I think more of an 7 to 8 win team. I think we talked about this too. I see them losing more games. I do see potentially Kirk Cousins getting more involved because there have been years where he's done more offensively than what he did last year. But even last year, a really good year, very efficient year, 107.4 passer rating, so very highly rated in that regard. 69.1 completion percentage. So he was a very efficient passer last year, which is why I have him up at number 10. I do potentially like the guy I have at number 11 a little bit more, and that's Matt Stafford, who played very well through 8 games last year.
I feel like you could put Stafford over Cousins going into this year because I like the offense in Detroit a lot more. And Stafford was an actual, like a top 8 fantasy quarterback going into week 9 when he went down. They added DeAndre Swift, which I think is going to add a little bit more reliability at running back than Kerryon Johnson. And I like the overall outlook for Detroit in a North division that seems like everybody is going to take a step back except Detroit. Like, if they can figure that defense out, I think you can make a case for the Lions to win that division.
And they've added some pieces on that defense side of the ball, too. And Julian Okwara on the defensive front. Duron Harmon was a free agent they signed from New England, and they drafted Jeff Okudah. So they've added pieces defensively that might be able to get him over the top. But real quickly, one more thing on Stafford. 19 touchdown passes through 8 games. So he's pacing 38 touchdown passes during the season. That's how good he was doing last year, to finish with 106 passer rating, which is by far the highest of his career. So hopefully he can bring that into 2020 and continue that dominance. That brings us to number 12. My number 12 is based on a guy who didn't start all last season, but he had some really good games down the stretch, and he made a surprise team in the AFC, and that's Ryan Tannehill.
This is going to be a really good rank for you or a really bad one. And then I think it's not so much on Tannehill, it's going to be on Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry was the reason why we saw the good Ryan Tannehill. He didn't have a ton of pressure on him, and he was able to get the ball downfield to an emerging A.J. Brown. So if we see a similar play calling from Arthur Smith in Tennessee, I think this is going to be a really bold, but it's going to have a big payoff for Ryan Tannehill and him at your 12.
Yeah, I don't think they asked him to do too much last year, and that really helped him out. He completed 70.3% of his passes.
In the games that were winning, he was throwing about 20, 21 times. If you look down that stretch.
Yeah, I mean, he really performed well. I don't know if it's just maybe lightning in a bottle that they can't put together again next year, but he was electric for them. And he finished with the league high 117.5 passer rating, which is really, I can't stress how efficient that is. That's really good for him. And he finished 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and that's in 10 starts. So for me, I really like what he's done. I don't know if he'll be the same player, but I do think he belongs in that 12 to 16 range in terms of quarterback play, even based on just a limited sample last year. But that does bring me to another guy who I think is going to rebound this coming season. He didn't have a great year last year, but I think he's going to do much better in 2020, and that is Matt Ryan.
Matt Ryan is a player that I can see him having a big year. The weapons are there, and they moved Sanu and they lost Hooper. I like Hayden Hurst a lot, a former first-round pick. A little bit more speed than Austin Hooper. He was injured in his first season, which allowed Mark Andrews to emerge in Baltimore, and Andrews really never looked back. I think this is going to be a big spot for Hurst. He could potentially see 70, 80 targets. So I don't really think this offense is going to skip a beat. They should get better a little bit with Todd Gurley in the running game. And if these guards that they added last year who ended up getting hurt, if they can get back on the field. But as far as the win column, I just don't see it for Atlanta. So this will be a prototypical Matt Ryan year statistically, but this is nothing more than an 8-8 team.
Yeah, I think this is a 7 to 8 win team, basically.
And that's being generous.
Last 2 years. I think, what'd you say?
I said that 8 wins is being generous, and that's because of that defense, because they reached in the draft.
Yeah, they had a lot of issues defensively.
And Dallas benefited.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. But I do think that defense is troublesome offensively. I think you get a lot better with Todd Gurley, honestly. I think if Gurley's even 75% of what he used to be, that's still a very significant upgrade of what they had last year.
Right.
So I think he gets a little bit better offensively, can diversify a little bit more. And I do expect him to bounce back just because he tends to be up and down. You look at last year, not a great year. The year before that, very good. 2017, not great. 2016, that was the year he won MVP. So he's kind of been up and down every other year. This is a year I expect him to bounce back, but I don't think it will ultimately change Atlanta's fate. That brings us to number 14, and this is a very potentially controversial pick, but this is a project that I'm making off a projection based on what I think he can do if he's fully healthy. And at 14, I got Ben Roethlisberger.
I think Ben could have a tough time if the Steelers try to come out and be a passing team and be an offensive team like when they had Bell and Brown and Juju. But after that Minkah Fitzpatrick move, and all the signs are pointing to Pittsburgh transitioning back into a running team that plays really good defense, and that's what we saw from Ben in the first 5 years of his career. I don't know if he threw more than 470 pass attempts in his first 5 years, and the Steelers are winning. I even think they have a Super Bowl in that era, and I think that's how we're going to see them try to close out Ben's career, because that's how you're going to protect him. He's a 38 or so year old quarterback coming off injuries, and if they were on the brink of a postseason appearance with the quarterback play they had last year, if you add a protected Big Ben, this could be a team that nobody's talking about that makes a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I think the key for Pittsburgh is once you get to the playoffs, it's an entirely different ballgame because I think Pittsburgh can put together those runs. They've done it in the past. If a team like Pittsburgh just makes it to the playoffs, just gets in their foot in the door, they can take a whole lot. And I do expect Ben will be very successful this coming year, even with maybe some questionable weapons. I think he only throws the ball about 400 to 450 times this coming season instead of close to 700, which is what they had him throw in 2018. He won't get near that number. I think they'll work to protect him.
They don't have the personnel.
No, they don't have the personnel to do it anymore. They just don't have the weapons. They don't have Antonio Brown. You can't replicate that. So I think they'll be a little more conservative with the passing game. I think that will, in the end, extend Ben's career hopefully for one more year and hopefully keep him protected. And maybe he'll actually get through the full 16-game season. But we now move on to number 15. Number 15 is a guy who I think is getting a lot of unnecessary hate, especially from his head coach, and that's Derek Carr.
I don't even know if Carr is going to be the starting quarterback by midseason. I think by Gruden, Gruden already has made it known, and we've seen it on Hard Knocks and through the media. I don't think he's a big Derek Carr fan, despite the fact that Carr keeps winning football games or the best of his ability. That was last season with a depleted wide receiver core, but they went out and signed Mariota. And usually when you sign a notable name like that, the writing's on the wall for the starter. So if the Raiders come out slow, I think they eventually pivot to Mariota. And that's not Derek Carr's fault, because I think Carr is better than what people give him credit for. I don't value him as high as you and Goodpaster, but I think he's better than the rap he has in the media.
Yeah, I think he's a much better quarterback than what they've given him to this point. I know he hasn't produced the touchdown totals a lot of people would want, but like you said, hasn't really had the weapons. His best receiving threat last year was Tyrell Williams. Actually, it was actually the tight end Darren Waller, but his best wide receiver was Tyrell Williams, who really isn't a number one option in the NFL. And he did finish the year by completing 70.4% of his pass attempts and finished with a 100.8 quarterback rating. So he did have a very efficient year. But again, just didn't have the offense. The offensive line there is not good anymore. The offensive line maybe 5 or 6 years ago was pretty good in Oakland, but now in Las Vegas, it's not the same caliber of talent anymore. So I still think there are a lot of holes around Derek Carr. I think you're right. I think Gruden will do whatever he can to put Marcus Mariota in within the first 6 weeks of the season. And it's really unfortunate for Carr because they're in a tough division this year. I don't see the Raiders winning many games. But
no.
That brings us to number 16. Number 16, I have Jimmy Garoppolo, who went to the Super Bowl last year with the San Francisco 49ers.
Jimmy Garoppolo, I think he's a lot better than his statistics show. I think there is a trust issue between Garoppolo and Shanahan. We saw that a little bit in the Super Bowl. We saw that in games where he was only throwing in the single digits. And I get that's maybe what Kyle Shanahan wants to do, but Garoppolo is a better quarterback than that. He has 6 or so losses on his resume. I would put Garoppolo ahead of Derek Carr.
Yeah, I'm keeping him below Carr.
I mean, if he wins the Super Bowl, you're putting him ahead of Tannehill, right? You're putting him up that high.
Potentially, but I don't like how he performed in the Super Bowl. And you're right. I think a little bit is the play calling. I think there's a disconnect there. You're not giving Garoppolo consistent snaps game in and game out. I think first off, Kyle Shanahan was running the ball last year until he basically came down to time to run the ball in the Super Bowl, and then he didn't do that. But aside from coaching, I just don't trust Jimmy G in big games yet for whatever reason. I've got hesitations about him. Even during the playoff run last year, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So for me,
that's fair.
There's questions about him being clutch, so I have him a little bit lower. I can't say Derek Carr has even appeared in playoff games to show he's clutch, though, to be fair. But I am going to keep Garoppolo around the middle of the pack. That's really where I think he belongs right now. I don't think he's a top 10 guy. We'll move to 17, and we have a potentially controversial pick here, and I'll say this: it's more so about I'm not trusting the guys who are below him at this point. But at 17, we're about midway through the list. We have our first and only rookie quarterback who I'm projecting to be a starter week 1, and that's Joe Burrow.
So you're putting Burrow, a rookie, up this high? Where is he?
17.
That's a little high, no?
We've never
seen him. We haven't seen him play a game yet, and I like Burrow, and I love the ceiling, and I love the Bengals this year. But 17, I mean, we are going into this back end of the quarterback range, but I would probably put Rivers ahead of him, at least.
See, there's probably 4 quarterbacks I would say coming up down the list who I think you can make the argument that are better than Joe Burrow, but just based on the situation he's in, I think Burrow will be better this coming year. I think he'll be 17. I love what he did last year. I watched breakdowns of his film. I think he's got all the basic stuff you need, and he's got the receiving weapons now in Cincinnati. I know there's some questions about the offensive line. They get Jonah Williams, though, at left tackle. I think will be very good. You got running backs in Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard. And your receiving core is A.J. Green, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and John Ross. So I think he's got the weapons. Even if he makes mistakes, let me put it this way, even if he makes a lot of mistakes, I think he'll offensively have the weapons to cover for it and potentially still put up the numbers and still put up the stats, even if they're not maybe winning as many games as you would expect them to. Well, I'm willing to swing for the fences one time here and put Joe Burrow at 17, but that will take us to 18. And 18 is a guy whom also I have questions with when it comes down to the playoffs. I don't trust his deep ball at all, and I think you know who I'm talking about. It's Josh Allen.
Yeah, Allen is a player to where if he can just correct his issues as a quarterback, I think this kid can jump up into the top 12 easily, but he was the worst deep ball passer in the NFL. Stephon Diggs should help that. But if it wasn't for his rushing floor, I don't even know if Josh Allen would be a starting quarterback in the league.
Yeah, let's put it this way. If he couldn't rush for 500 yards and about 8 or 9 touchdowns a year, I think this guy is probably in the mid to low 20s. I mean, really, his passing ability, his ability to throw the ball is totally still in question for me. I think he crumbled in the playoffs this past year, and he's yet to complete over 60% of his passes in a single season. So for me, this is a guy who is far from a done deal at the NFL level. I don't think it's a guarantee he'll be starting in 3 or 4 years. But like you said, his running ability is really what separates him now, really what keeps him the job in Buffalo. And he's got a very good defense there, so he's not asked to do too much. So I see him sticking around for a full 5 years in Buffalo. But after that, I really don't know where this guy's career is going to go. And that takes us up to number 19. Now, my number 19 quarterback is a second-year player from Arizona. It's Kyler Murray.
I would put Kyler up, maybe even ahead of Joe Burrow. I love what they're doing for him in Arizona. I thought he had a really good season, especially in those games, those tough games against San Francisco, where they were both about 3-point losses for Kyler Murray. And they went out and got him a new offensive line, essentially with stealing Jones in the draft. They went out and got DeAndre Hopkins, and this defense is going to be a lot better. So I'm really optimistic for Kyler.
So I think it'll be very good this coming year, but just based on what he did as a rookie so far, I think he was a little overrated in terms of how well he played this past year. I know they kept him in games, certainly, but I think he didn't play as well as people maybe credited him for. I know he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he deserved that award. I think Josh Jacobs deserved it. So I do have questions about both him and Daniel Jones. I think were a little overrated after the rookie seasons, which is why I have him down at 19. Just because I think other rookies have had far better seasons and still been given a lot of trash maybe for their mistakes. I think Kyler Murray got a little bit of a pass in Arizona just because he's playing in the smaller market that we didn't expect a lot from. But that does bring us to 20th overall. And 20th overall, I have Jared Goff.
Why are you burying Goff?
I have sincere issues with Goff. He threw 22 touchdowns and 16 interceptions this past year.
Yeah, that ratio wasn't there, but how much of it is on Goff and how much of it is on the fact that defense didn't play well, and it's really not going to play well this year. That defense is going to be terrible, and there was no running game. They didn't get better on the offensive line, so I think Goff is a player who – maybe we saw his potential leading them to the Super Bowl, but without all of those pieces working around him, maybe last year is what you see is what you get. And I don't blame Goff.
It's hard to blame Goff. It's hard to blame him because it's not his fault. It's how his team was managed.
Because Wentz doesn't have the weapons that Goff has, but Goff doesn't have the line that Wentz has.
Yeah, well, I think you could say that for a lot of quarterbacks. I think he doesn't have the line that Dak Dak has. He doesn't have the line that Big Ben has. He doesn't have an offensive line, really. And I think they're getting worse. This team's not getting better. He does have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. That's probably the two lone bright spots for him. I know they drafted Cam Akers, who I really like. But at the same point, I don't think they have the running capabilities to replace Todd Gurley. and their defense is only getting worse. For me, I think you're actually going to get a worse version of the Rams this coming year than what you did last year. And if Goff struggled last year, I think you got to wait and see what's going to happen this year because I think it's only going to get worse from here for that entire franchise. I know we've talked about this before. I think they're going to end up being the worst team in that division. I think Arizona's going to jump them.
Absolutely.
So now we're up to 21. We're not at Philip Rivers yet, but Philip Rivers is coming up here. I got Daniel Jones at 21. But the only real knock being he fumbles like crazy.
Yeah, and he throws a lot of dangerous passes, a lot of interceptable passes if you go into the quarterback metrics. The fumbles need to be corrected. I'm extremely optimistic that Jason Garrett will fix Daniel Jones and get him in the right direction. I'm actually extremely optimistic if this New York offense can stay healthy and they can fix Daniel Jones. This is a top 10 offense. That's how much firepower is there.
Yeah, I like what they did in the draft, too. I think getting Andrew Thomas with their draft pick was a really smart move because now you set him up where you've prioritized the offensive line. So you got offensive lines working and building its way up. You got Saquon Barkley in the backfield, who obviously is going to be a threat in the passing game as well. You got Daniel Jones. Evan Ingram's still there, and Evan Ingram has been underutilized and is underrated. And you still got guys like Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Golden Tate on the outside. So you've got weapons there. I think Daniel Jones is probably going to take a step forward this year. I think Kyler Murray will as well. So I think those two quarterbacks we saw last year kind of hinted at their potential, didn't really thrive, but I think we will see them take a little bit of a step forward this coming season. But like you said, I still have some questions about Daniel Jones in terms of his decision-making and, of course, the fumbling issue. He fumbled 18 times last year, which led the NFL. You just can't even do that. You shouldn't even be fumbling 9 times, honestly. So there are some things holding him back. But that brings us up to the 22nd spot, and this is where I have Philip Rivers. Based on the fact they threw 23 touchdowns to 20 interceptions this past year, so a very poor interception-touchdown ratio. I will say this. All the quarterbacks ranked this low. If someone is going to rise up this coming season and jump up towards the top 15, it will be Philip Rivers.
Yeah, Rivers is an interesting quarterback going into this season. I'm not extremely high on him, but they did try to put weapons around him in the draft. This offensive line is going to be good. So really, if Philip Rivers can play like he did last year, because he threw for a ton of yards, and get the protection and throw out of a clean pocket, I think we can see a little bit of a bounce back and what is probably his last season. Or maybe not. If he plays well and wins some games, they'll probably bring him back for another year and try to get a quarterback because they don't have a backup plan in place.
Yeah, they don't have a succession plan. The only other guy they have on the roster that really matters is Jacoby Brissett. But his contract ends up this current year anyways, I'm pretty sure. So it doesn't really matter for them. They did take Jacob Eason, but, I mean, if you watch Jacob Eason play, you would know there's plenty of flaws there. You don't really want to plan about starting him next year. But that takes us now to, I believe it's 23. And it's a guy I have coming in. This is this interesting situation because I think people have underrated him in the past. I think we really saw what he did with Miami this past year. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick, who I believe will be replaced by Tua Tagovailoa at some point this early in the season. I do think he'll get replaced. But I think based on what he did last year, with a football team that had very little talent, only Devontae Adams really around them, and Fitzpatrick was the leading rusher on that team as well. He still managed to get them to 5 wins, which I think is very impressive, and that's why I have him this high.
You don't think Tua's going to open the year?
It's very back and forth for me. I think I took the more conservative route in saying Fitzpatrick will open the year. Like I said, I do expect Tua by week 6. By week 6, Tua will be in place as the starter. I kind of just want an excuse to put Fitzpatrick here and talk Fitzpatrick up for a little bit.
Listen, I like Fitzpatrick, but we know what we're going to get. I think we're going to get big numbers from a guy who knows that he knows his role in the NFL. So he can take more chances and put up the big stats and once in a while win you a few games. But they drafted Tua to be their future. And if we get any semblance of a training camp, Tua's going to be out there.
Also, if he's healthy going into the year and he's totally fine, everything like that, he'll be the starter by week 3, probably. Just because I believe they'll probably open the season, whether he's starting or not, losing a couple of games. I think they'll drop a couple early. Because this is really a football team that's a year away from being competitive in my mind.
I think they can win some games. If they got better on both sides of the ball, and I think they'll be dangerous if Tua is the real deal.
I'll tell you this: they could probably be a 10-win team's worst nightmare, something like that. They're going to be the team that you don't want to play down the stretch if you're trying to get into the playoffs.
Right.
At 24, I have a guy who missed a couple of games last year. And I like him, but I know there's some doubters at this point. And looking back at his numbers, he had a worse year than I remember, but it's Sam Darnold.
I like Darnold a lot, and this is going to be a telling year. I think if he can stay healthy and the team around him can stay healthy, the Jets are a 9-10 win football team. But if things come off, I think we could potentially see Gase will probably go before Darnold. But Darnold might be one of those players who may have just been drafted in the wrong situation at the wrong time.
Well, yeah, and you look at the Jets' receiving options. They really don't have any receivers around him. They've got some bad contracts. Le'Veon Bell didn't really work out so far last year. So this is an organization and an offense that are lacking key pieces. And in his first 2 years, Darnold has thrown 36 touchdowns and 28 interceptions. So not the touchdown-interception ratio you're looking for, which is why I have him this low. But I'll say this, I'm holding out hope for Darnold. I believe he can still be a very good quarterback in the NFL. It's just a question of can they put the pieces around him to give him the chance to succeed. So now we move on to number 25. Number 25, and this is a little bit of a projection based on what I saw in a limited sample size last year, and also based on the offensive pieces he now has around him. It's Drew Lock from Denver.
I like Lock a lot, and I think the Broncos finally think that they have their quarterback. They went out and got a ton of options. And if Drew Lock works, he's not only going to be a player that you're going to bump into your top 15 or 16 quarterbacks, but I think he can get this Broncos team to the postseason if he's the real deal.
Yeah, I think Denver's probably the most threatening team to Kansas City in that entire division in the AFC West. I love what they did. They got Jerry Jeudy, they got KJ Hamler, so they prioritized giving Lock some people to throw to. They also in the offseason got Nick Van Nett, who's a great run blocking tight end. They went out and they got Melvin Gordon, which is obviously a huge pickup as well. Graham Glasgow to play center. And they drafted Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU, who's an interior offensive lineman as well. So you really beefed up this offense here.
And the wide receivers they got in the draft.
Yeah, Jeudy and Hamler. You get a route runner and you get a deep threat guy. And you already have Cortland Sutton, who's more of a big body guy who can make kind of a little bit of plays at every level of the defense. So you got plenty of offensive weapons. Your defense got better too, in my opinion. So this is a team that's turning upward. Like I said, I just haven't seen enough from Drew Lock to really move him higher on the list. I expect he'll really take a jump, though. That leads us now to number 26. Number 26, I have a guy who I had probably ranked inside the top 20 going to last year, but then he took a huge hit, and it's Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Baker, if he doesn't get off to a good start, I think this is going to be Case Keenum's team. So I think Baker Mayfield's future as an NFL starting quarterback is probably going to come down to the first 6 to 8 games.
I'll say this. I think he's going to get replaced at some point during the season by Case Keenum. Maybe for the second half of a game. I think he'll start probably the next week again anyways. I think there's going to be spots where he gets subbed out of games. Kind of like Jameis Winston and Ron Fitzpatrick, where they were down Tampa Bay together for a little bit. Where it's kind of like they put Fitzpatrick in for a little while and then Jameis Winston comes back. It's kind of back and forth. And that's what I expect in Cleveland. I don't think this franchise is going to get any of a clear direction of where they're going with their future. I think they're still going to be a little dysfunctional. I think this quarterback situation is only going to aid the collapse of the new regime that they just put in place. So I do not expect great things from the Cleveland Browns this coming season, despite all the weapons and all the money they poured into that offense. But anyways, that leads us to number 27. Number 27 is a guy who, again, played a limited sample size last year, performed, well, I'll say efficiently when he was on the field. It's Teddy Bridgewater.
I am not optimistic on Teddy Bridgewater. I think it was to pay him the amount of money they did. They got him weapons, but the most successful Teddy Bridgewater, I believe, was only thrown 14 touchdowns or 7. I think it was 14 touchdowns. He did that twice, and that's with him playing in 15, 16 games. He needs a defense around him. You look at his success in Minnesota, extremely talented defense, good running backs, and this is going back to Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon. He had a good run with the Saints. Again, a really talented defense, a ton of weapons. Going to Carolina, where they spent their whole draft on defensive players. This is going to be a bad team. We're going to see Teddy operate from a negative game script a ton. And it wouldn't surprise me if Teddy really just falls on his face. They'd go to P.J. Walker.
Yeah, I mean, he went to the worst team in the division. And let's face it, his prime Teddy Bridgewater in 2015 when he made the Pro Bowl, he shouldn't have been a Pro Bowl that year. He just shouldn't have. He threw for 3,200 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. He's never been a Pro Bowl player. He's never been close to a Pro Bowl player. And after his knee injury, he had some mobility in his first couple of years in the NFL. His knee injury knocked out all that mobility. He's not a running quarterback anymore. So for me, Teddy Bridgewater is kind of a low-level game manager who has been thrown on a very terrible team. I think he's going to get exposed this coming season. But that brings us now to number 28. Number 28, I have Tyrod Taylor, who I do think at some point will be replaced by Justin Herbert. It's just how Tyrod Taylor's career goes. But for now, I think he's the projected starter. Just because I think Herbert, unlike Tua, is not as clean and not as ready for the NFL game.
I like Tyrod Taylor. I think if he would have ended up going into this year and you would think he's going to be the starter for 16 games, you could talk playoffs because of how talented the roster is. But at some point, they're going to turn to Justin Herbert.
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's just a question of when. I think they'll be looking to do it probably by week 6. I mean, that's usually the number I go to. Usually 6 games is when they turn. But we talk about a guy like Tyrod Taylor who got replaced by Baker Mayfield after, I think, 3 or 4 games? Maybe 2 games. It wasn't that long. So I feel bad for Tyrod Taylor because he's honestly a guy who probably deserves a shot at a starting spot. But he's just not going to get it because there's going to be someone under him all the time who's going to replace him. That's just what's going to happen here in the situation as well. But it brings us to number 29. Number 29, I have Gardner Minshew.
Minshew's on the hot seat. I think the Jaguars are a team. They were pursuing Andy Dalton. I think they are a quiet team who can end up getting Cam Newton. And I think that what's holding Cam up is the injury and not being able to get a physical. But if the Jaguars end up going to this year with Gardner Minshew, they're in a good spot because if Gardner plays well and looks like he could be the future, then all is well and good. If he doesn't, not only do you know that Gardner is not it, but then you're going to be in place to go get a Lawrence next year because they'll be picking in the top 5.
Yeah, that's the thing. I expect this franchise to try to lose. So I don't think Gardner Minshew is going to do very well, even though I think he's probably better than maybe where I have him rated in terms of talent-wise, in terms of what he did last year, even with the limited supporting cast. Well, I think this organization is trying to lose football games. I don't think they really want to win out this coming year. And they're moving a lot of their key pieces both on offense and defense, so they don't expect a great year from Gardner Minshew or from the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's just a bad situation for him to be in. But speaking of bad situations and bad quarterbacks, Mitchell Trubisky is at number 30.
Yeah, Trubisky, I think the writing's on the wall. They declined his 50-year option. They brought in Nick Foles. They did restructure Nick Foles, which tells me their starting quarterback for 2021 is not on the roster.
Yeah, they're going to have to find someone new moving forward because there's not an option here. Like, I like Nick Foles, but he's not going to be your starter for 16 games. He's just not going to do a full 16-game season. And I don't think Trubisky's a starting caliber quarterback. I think he's going to take the route of a Marcus Mariota, where after his rookie deal, he ends up being a backup somewhere else. So I think we're seeing the end of the Marcus Mariota in Chicago, and that brings us to 31. 31, I have Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, we don't know anything about Jarrett Stidham. And just like I feel like with the Jaguars and Minshew, the Patriots are going to see what they have in Stidham. If they have something, you move forward and build around them. If you don't, then you're in a top 5 situation because that roster will not win more than 6 games the way it stands.
Yeah. It actually came to when he played at Auburn, they came and played at Clemson my freshman year. I went to the game. So I got to see him firsthand. I like Jarrett Stidham. I do like him. I just don't think he's going to be an NFL starting quarterback who can make you a winning team in a 16-game season. I just don't see that. Technically 17 games eventually. So, but my final quarterback I'm projecting to be a star at number 32, it's Dwayne Haskins.
He could be the starter. They can also turn to Kyle Allen, but I think no matter who they go to in week 1 or at some point, they're going to be the worst quarterback in football.
It could be
Now,
the worst team in football.
the Redskins are another team linked to Cam Newton. Ron Rivera has not shot that down, and he knows the system, and this could be another injury. We're waiting to see if Cam's good or not.
Yeah, I think this is a scenario where this is just a bad football team. I mean, honestly, they've got defense. They got a good defensive line. They got talented players up front. They don't really have a secondary. They don't really have the linebacking core. They don't have an offensive supporting cast. They just don't have those pieces right now. So for me, this is just a bad football team. It's a poorly run organization. And I think Dwayne Haskins is just going to be left out to dry pretty much, even though it's not really fair for him. But he's been thrown into a bad situation. I don't think he's got the mechanics. I don't think he's got the upside to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. So I think this is going to be a very short career or a very short stint in Washington for Dwayne Haskins. But that wraps up our official first quarterback power rankings for 2020. We've gone through all 32 quarterbacks. And of course, there are guys who could potentially start this coming year that we didn't talk about. We mentioned guys like Nick Foles could potentially get in there, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa. So maybe in a couple of months before the season starts again, and we're running out of ideas, we desperately need content, we'll come back to quarterback power rankings perhaps. But for now, that's it for us. So Anthony, any final thoughts, or do you want to tell us where we can find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru, and you can follow my show at the FF Face Off, and we can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms.
All right, and you can follow me at Sam_Cheats33 on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and pretty much every other social media platform. And you can follow The Grueling Truth pretty much anywhere when you listen to regular podcasts. And you can follow our content on thegruelingtruth.com. So thank you for tuning in today. Anthony and I will be back at some point. We don't know yet when yet, but we'll figure it out probably afterwards the show today. So thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you in the future. And for Anthony Servino, I'm Sam Teets, signing off.